Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of Strategic Planning and Infrastructure at Maidstone. We are on the 18th of November 2020 and we're conducting the meeting online. I'm Councillor David Burton. I am the chairman of the aforesaid committee. My role as chairman will continue this evening. However, the responsibility for managing the meeting has been temporarily assigned to the Democratic Services Officer, Miss Parfitt. This officer will not steer the debate, but they will assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols. They will also be producing the minutes and provide procedural advice should we require it. I'd like to remind everyone that instant messaging will be visible to those viewing the meeting, and I would ask that members only use it to indicate their wish to speak. And again, I'd confirm that the meeting is broadcast live and will be recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will include the instant messaging. Will anybody else be recording the proceedings? And I ask that not to prevent you, but just so that others would be aware.
Councillor Mackay, I've reserved my right.
Your right is duly noted. And I'm going to move to the attendance register next. And if I could ask the clerk to take the attendance list by reading out the list of committee members who will confirm their attendance by answering present, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So we've got Councillor Burton.
Present.
Councillor Clark. I'll come back. Councillor English.
Present.
Councillor Garton. I'll come back. Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
Present.
Councillor Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Mumford.
Present.
Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
Present.
Councillor Spooner.
Present.
And Chairman, I'll just double check with Councillor Clark. Nope. And Councillor Garton.
Miss Parfitt, it does look as though Councillor Clark is now attending.
Oh, thank you very much for that. And I'll just double check with Councillor Garton as it is showing that he is in the call.
Yes, sorry, I am in the room. Yes, thank you.
Thank you,
And
Councillor.
can we just hear Councillor Clark confirm that he's...
Yes, I'm present, Chairman.
Excellent.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll now ask the clerk to read out the list of officers who are presenting this evening and to indicate which items they are going to help us with.
Thank you. So with us this evening, we have the Interim Local Plan Review Director, Philip Coyne, the Head of Planning and Development, Rob Jarman, the Planning Team Leader of Mid-Kent Legal, Russell Fitzpatrick, the Strategic Planning Manager, Mark Edgerton, for item 16, the Head of Housing and Community Services, John Littlemore, for item 17, Operations Engineer, Charlie Reynolds, for item 14, Operations Officer, Lou Tuck, for item 14, the Democratic and Electoral Services Manager, Ryan O'Connell, myself, Olivia Parfitt, as clerk, and for item 15. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I believe we are a full house and there are no apologies. Can you just confirm that, please?
That is correct, Chairman. Thank
you. And accordingly, at item 2, there will be no substitute members to record. Item 3, the matter of urgent updates. The minutes of the previous meeting held on the 9th of November 2020 were published as part of an amended agenda, so you should have all seen that. And can I also indicate to you that I intend to take item 17, which is the motion concerning anti-idling, after item 15, just to facilitate the attendance of those connected to that item. If there's no dissent, I will take that to be agreed by all members. Thank you. Visiting members, I have received notification from Councillors Atkinson and Harper in relation to item 17 and Councillors J and T Sams for items 15 and item 16 also. Are there any other visiting members that I've missed, Ms. Parfitt?
There are not, Chairman, but it may be worth me highlighting that Councillor Harper hasn't actually joined the call this evening.
Okay, we will look out for his due arrival. Item 5, the matter of disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members or officers, please? None indicated, therefore none noted. Similarly, at item 6, disclosures of lobbying. And for this, I'll ask the clerk to go through the list of members and ask if they have disclosures. And please, I would say, would you answer none or yes? And if it is yes, to specify the agenda item or items.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Councillor Burton.
I have been lobbied extensively on all matters relating to the local plan.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Lobbied on all aspects of the local plan also.
Thank you. Councillor English.
I've been lobbied on the local plan and on the motion, item 17.
Thank you. Councillor Garton.
Yes, local plan definitely, and particularly that petition item 15. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
Agenda item 14 plus all aspects of the local plan review.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
15, 16, 17.
Councillor Mumford.
Just the aspects of the local plan review.
Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
All aspects of the local plan.
Thank you. And Councillor Spooner.
Items 15 and 16.
Thank you. That concludes the lobbying, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 7, there are no part 2 papers this evening, and I intend to take all items in public. Is that agreed? If I hear no dissent, I'll consider it agreed. That is therefore agreed. Item 8, the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of November 2020, as circulated with the amended agenda. I trust that you've all had an opportunity to peruse those. If I hear no dissent, I shall sign those as a correct record at a later date. No dissent noted. Item 9, there are no petitions served to this committee directly this evening. Item 10, is the question and answer session from members of the public. We have 6 questions this evening, and I would like to start that session by calling upon Mrs. Geraldine Brown for the first question, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We note in the paper for agenda item 16 that Regulation 18 consultation is proposed to run from the 1st to the 22nd of December. Given the immense time pressures to prepare for Regulation 19, what plans does Maidstone Borough Council have in place to ensure that work on the input continues intensively throughout the extended holiday period? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not aware of there being any extended holidays beyond the normal bank holidays over the festive season. And I've spoken with officers and that they assure me that, as is their normal practice, there will be a team working at times possibly on a rota basis, but there will be a team working throughout the period, and I'm sure their efforts will be particularly placed upon the Reg 18 responses. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Chairman. Do you have a timescale by which the appraisal of the consultation responses will be completed?
It is intended, I believe, to bring those consultation responses to this committee in February.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd go to Mr. John Horn, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. As evidenced by negative effects stated in the published sustainability analysis, why are constraints such as water, both supply and disposal, not deployed to reduce the assessed housing needs figure to a lower, perhaps much lower, housing target?
As you would expect, discussions have been ongoing and do continue with infrastructure and utility providers. Current outcomes are contained in the published infrastructure capacity paper, which is available on the local plan review webpage. But to date, none of the providers have indicated at this stage that infrastructure and utility provision would create a justification for reducing the housing target. And of course, Regulation 18B gives a further opportunity for formal responses indicating capacity constraint to be made. But to date, we have not received such a response from any of the infrastructure and utility providers. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, if I may. Thank you for that answer, Chairman. Most grateful. But as an example, for instance, in Hampshire, the concerns of Natural England and the Environment Agency has resulted on a ceiling on water usage for new build. And as we in Maidstone rely to a large extent on imported water, will the supply of water now be re-examined with a view to an application possibly of constraints on overall development?
Well, I think the case would be that we would be relying upon Natural England or the Environment Agency to raise that subject in the Reg 18B consultation or at any other stage, and then we would seek assurances from the water providers that they can address the concerns. If at any stage we categorically get the response that water supply cannot be met, then I'm sure that would have a profound impact upon the potential to build further housing in the area. But we do require an absolutely direct response directly from the providers. And I thank you for your question. And we'll next turn to Mr. Hughes, please.
Good evening. Duty to cooperate. When will we actually see clear documentary evidence of its exercise to date, suitably redacted as confidentiality dictates?
Council officers have been participating in regular duty to cooperate meetings, and these will be documented in the forthcoming authority monitoring report, which will be considered at this committee in December. And this is also a matter that I propose to raise under the work programme as well. Do you have a supplementary question, please?
I do. Just as a point of interest, Chairman, I think it is a requirement that it appears on your website when the draft plan is published. But my supplementary question is, as infrastructure, for example, transport or water, are major strategic issues for the local plan review, and in fact Maidstone is committed to give detailed consideration to the Leeds Langley Relief Road in the local plan review, and given the potential impact of Brexit and COVID on the infrastructure providers' workloads, are they committed to making their key inputs probably by March, April time to 2021 to allow proper consideration by officers and members before the preferred local plan review consultation in June, so that Maidstone will not fail the duty to cooperate test at its examination?
I think, Mr. Hughes, I've probably given you fairly wide margin by answering that question as to whether it really originates out of the original question or the answer. I can't answer directly for the commitment of others, but I have no reason to doubt that everybody involved in this process, our own officers, our own politicians, all the statutory consultees, other authorities will be working equally as hard as we are to conduct the duty to cooperate to full satisfaction for examination. And I thank you for that question. And I'd next like to take Mr. Titchener, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good evening. At your last SPY meeting, it was declared that gypsy and traveller sites would be carried forward in a separate planning document. We were assured that the same strict sustainability criteria and, presumably, prior classification into red and green would be applied, as they have been for dwellings for the settled community. Assuming proper consultation, that document may not be ready for Regulation 19 submission at the same time as the rest of the local plan review, and if that were the case, a separate Regulation 19 submission and a separate examination would presumably be required. That gypsy and traveller document may then not be adopted before the current local plan loses validity after 5 years. Therefore, from October 2022, what policy would apply when considering subsequent gypsy and traveller site applications?
You are quite right in considering gypsy and traveller matters as separate development plan document, that there is a lengthy process attached to that, and it may well be adopted after the local plan, reviewed local plan. But the policies that are proposed to apply after October 2022 are contained within the local plan review Regulation 18B preferred approaches document, which essentially is a continuation of the current policy, so that we don't have a period with nothing in place before the new DPD would gain full weight. So these are policies that protect existing site allocations and retain the development management policies for assessing relevant planning applications.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Can I ask a supplementary?
Yes, please.
Thank you for what you just said, but can you confirm that no shortcuts will be taken, and that, very importantly, the same rigorous sustainability criteria as have been used to produce the red and green housing proposals will definitely apply to gypsy and traveller sites, as all communities should surely be treated equally?
I can assure you that the producing the development plan document that we're referring to will follow the same procedural evidence and statutory requirements as any other local plan document. And I think that perhaps on this occasion, because it's not intrinsically being rolled up into the one giant document of a local plan review, this will allow us time to properly consider the matters more fully and in a timely manner with the latest evidence that is currently being collected for us. Thank you for your questions.
May I sort of just say something, Chairman, or not?
Regrettably, the procedure doesn't allow a third question, Mr.
Okay, well, thank you.
I can't start a new precedent.
Okay. Thanks.
Next, I'm calling upon Mrs. Cheryl Taylor-Maggio, please. Councillor Mrs. Cheryl Taylor-Maggio. I will come back to you, perhaps.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we have you now. Please, if you'd like to go ahead with your question.
My question relates to windfalls and windfall dwellings, and I'll go straight ahead. For windfall dwellings, paragraph 8 of the Housing Land Supply Update Analysis paper, dated the 1st of April 2020, stated that 114 per annum for small sites, and for large sites 90 per annum for 2024/25 to 2028-29 and 180 per annum for the following 2 years. If those per annum assumptions are extrapolated through the local plan review period, that would infer a total of 3,600 windfall dwellings. Why not use that figure and reduce future need by almost 900 dwellings rather than using 2,118 as stated in paragraph 5.12 of the draft Regulation 18 document?
So what I would say to you is that the agreed methodology for calculating windfall allowance is such that a small site allowance is applied from year 4 onwards, increasing in year 6 with the addition of 50% large site allowance, then increasing again from year 11 onwards, 100% large site allowance. This stepped approach to windfall allowance avoids the risk of double counting sites with permission early in the plan period. The 1st of April 2020 Housing Land Supply Update Analysis paper uses 2020-21 as year 1 and can therefore make a windfall allowance from 2023-24 onwards. The Local Plan Review Regulation 18B plan period uses 2022-23 as year 1, which means applying a windfall allowance from 2025-26 onwards. Further detail on the methodology for calculating windfall allowances is given in section 8 of the draft Strategic Land Availability Assessment, which has been published as part of the Local Plan Review evidence and is on the Council website. This approach has been consistently and successfully applied at examination of the adopted local plan and at planning appeals. Do you have a supplementary? I think we may have lost connection there. I hope it wasn't the number of dates that I quoted in the answer that caused the zone out. Councillor Taylor-Maggio, are you still with us for a supplementary, or I'll move on. I have Mr. Cooling next, please.
Thank you very much. A similar theme, this. Paragraph 5.9 of the draft Regulation 18 submission states that on top of the 7741 dwellings, according to the 5-year housing land supply 1st of April 2020, completed in the adopted local plan period up to 31st of March 2020, a further 3214 dwellings will be delivered before commencement of the local plan review period. That would represent delivery of a surplus 1,242 dwellings over the adopted local plan 883 per annum requirement up to commencement of the review period. That means of the 5790 to be identified within the local plan review, 1242 would not have been necessary if delivery had been better shaped. Is there nothing that MBC can do better to align rollout with requirement, and even now to get that 1242 removed from the 5790 requirement for the local plan review period for the benefit of the whole of our borough? Thank you.
So I think taking the matter of a perceived oversupply, we do have to remember that although the plan was adopted in 2017, it actually had a commencement date of 2011, during which there was significant undersupply. So we are on course to making the shortfall so that the plan in its entirety will deliver as promised and as examined. And I do think it's important for Maidstone's credibility at the next examination that our track record shows that the plan that we present will be delivered, and that we don't have an inspector wishing to impose additional margins for under delivery in the past. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I'll try to follow on from that. I think what has struck us is that perhaps there isn't the full effort given to what I would call ducking and diving or limbo dancing to try and interpret housing need to the benefit of residents. So may I ask, and thank you for your answer, but may I ask that you require officers to once again look at the 5790 for all possible ways, if the government regulations don't change, all possible ways to reduce that 5790 legitimately, perhaps taking a bit more risk. Thank you.
I don't think that there's an elected member, irrespective of what political colour that they represent, that would not require the housing number to be the lowest possible that we can attain. And I think, you know, the limbo dancing that you refer to is amply demonstrated in the way that the council, that the councillors have required the acceleration of the process to actually defend against the possibility of higher numbers being imposed. So, Mr. Corlin, I think we're all on the same page, and it's territory that we visit constantly with our officers.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I believe that completes the questions for this evening. Those members of the public that joined the meeting on a direct basis, if I could ask you to withdraw now, but please do continue to observe us via the broadcast on the YouTube. But I thank you all for your questions. You'll be delighted to know that agenda item 11 isn't required because there are no questions to the chairman from members. And item 12, if I could just ask you all to consider the committee work programme. It's for noting, but in line with what I alluded to earlier, the Vice Chair and myself have actually asked that officers would produce a report concerning a protocol covering the duty to cooperate, and we're asking that would be presented to the committee in January. I think we would all find it useful to actually know what the framework is that's actually being conducted for duty to cooperate, and accordingly that will be added to the work programme. Does anybody else wish to make any comments on the work programme? In which case we'll move on. Item 13, there's no outside body reports for this meeting. And I will next be at item 14, which is the matter of traffic regulation orders. And I'm going to ask Mr. Reynolds if he would assist by introducing this item, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to present the report in respect of objections received to the Kent County Council, various roads, Borough of Maidstone, weight restrictions and street parking places, variation number 30 order. The report makes recommendations to the committee to consider the objections received as part of the formal consultation process. Proposals for the introduction of restrictions were advertised for 14 locations, and during the consultation period, representations were received for 2 locations, Lewes Road and North Down Close. A more extensive proposal for major road improvements in Lewes Road was subsequently put forward, and as a result, we do not intend to progress this proposal. This report sets out the details of representations for North Down Close and seeks the views of the committee on the officer recommendation that proposed weight restrictions are implemented. The purpose of the report is the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee is asked to make decisions on the results of the objections to the traffic regulation order, in that the traffic regulation order is made to introduce parking restrictions in North Down Close. The residents of North Down Close have petitioned the council for the introduction of weight restrictions to prevent all-day parking. The survey received indicated that out of 39 households, 30 were in support of the restrictions, parking Monday to Friday, 2 for no change, with 1 suggestion, with 1 absentee and 5 no response indicated. The proposal for the Monday to Friday 1 to 1:30 restrictions was advertised, and during the consultation period, 7 objections were received on the grounds that restriction times would impact on residents and their visitors and would inconvenience people, and dispersion of vehicles into other surrounding streets would also have a detrimental effect on the mainly residential street. We also received 14 representations in support of the proposals. All properties have driveways, and a proportion of vehicles parking in locations are non-residents. The proposed restrictions are minimal as feasible to cause as little disruption as possible to the residents, and any vehicles will be monitored, and if identified, survey considered for further restrictions. As the proposal was put forward initially after we received representation from the residents, and during the formal consultation, the majority of residents are in favour of the proposals, we would recommend to proceed with the proposals. Therefore, a report was represented to the Joint Transportation Board on the 14th of October, and the recommendation to proceed was agreed. Therefore, our recommendation is for the committee to consider views of the Transportation Board and the Strategic and Planning Infrastructure Committee be recommended to proceed with the proposal to make the order to introduce parking restrictions in North Down Close. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I don't have a note of any visiting members for this item, so I'll move straight to members, and Councillor English, you're first, to be followed by Councillor Garton.
Well, it wasn't a question, as I actually was at the Joint Transport Board and heard the last presentation by officers. I mean, this has been comprehensively consulted on and has received this significant level of support. I don't think Councillor Clark is here, it's his ward, but on his behalf, so to speak, I would like to move the recommendation that I recommend that these regulations be introduced.
So for the sake of clarity, we're discharging recommendation 1 by having this consideration, and it will be the words as per 2 on the papers. I think you're moving, Councillor. Yes?
Absolutely correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'll come to Councillor Garton then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's sort of, I'm always a bit reluctant to impose new restrictions of any type. It is very telling when one resident writes here, I think denying commuters the opportunity to save over £1,000 a year in parking charges whilst getting some daily exercise shows a lack of community spirit. It is quite frankly a bit mean. That's on page 14 of our papers as a representation. It's a valid point, isn't it? I mean, there seems to be also a problem of weekend parking and parking where people park on both sides of the road, and so therefore the emergency services can't get through. This is not being solved by what we're suggesting today, a parking restriction between 1 and 1:30. So maybe it's very unfortunate that we don't have any of the ward members here tonight to give us a bit more local insight. Maybe we just need a yellow line or a double yellow line on one side of the road rather than introducing a resident parking zone of some description. The other question is the timing from 1 to 1:30, and I think that's a question to Mr. Reynolds directly. Is that timing being scheduled that enforcement officers could actually make this part of their round? Are there neighbouring parking areas with similar restrictions, which have their restrictions, say, between 12 and 12:30 and 12:30 to 1, so that this is part of a round, or is this an arbitrary time slot? Because if it's arbitrary and we don't have a parking officer making a particular round, then it becomes very much unenforceable if it's only been controlled once or twice a week or even less. So these are concerns which come to my mind. Whether the problem could not be simply solved by having a single double yellow line on one side of the road, and possibly then the residents coming back to us in a couple of months' time saying this worked or it didn't work. We do have the dispersal of commuter parkings into neighbouring roads, and I think we had a couple of objections from residents living further up north of that road. I once or twice parked on a similar road. I think it was the road just opposite North Downs Close, and used it to go into the town centre. It is a pretty long walk to the town centre. I would not want to do that every day. Parking was quite easily to be had there. The whole road was empty, so I don't particularly buy that we have a substantial commuter problem there. But then again, in fairness, there are 39 houses in that road. The response rate was pretty high, that 30 were in support of restricted parking. So I will not want to stand in the way of the wishes of those people. But could we also have, just for clarification, how did we get these 30? Was there an officer going from house to house of these 39 houses and surveyed the residents individually? Because we have the objections as well as these figures, which are not substantiated, merely been mentioned in the paper. So these are two questions for the officer about the enforcement times, whether that coincides with officers' time to enforce it, and B, where does the 30 out of 39 figure come from? Page 6, paragraph 2.8.
Mr. Reynolds, can you address those 2 points for us?
I can indeed, yeah. The first one being the timing. The timing was suggested originally by the residents, but there are roads in and around the area that have the same restrictions. So, and plus the CEOs are all around that area anyway. So, and Vinters Park is a classic one where you have an half-hour restriction, which covers all of that, and it's just to stop long-term parking. So, yes, there are other roads in the area which have a similar, or if not the same, restrictions. So, hence we could control that area quite easily.
Mr. Reynolds, that was just my point. If they are the same restrictions, it's not really helpful, isn't it? Because an enforcement officer can only be in one place at the time. So could we, if they are same restrictions, shouldn't it be more sensible to stack these times, saying if the same restrictions in the neighbourhood are from 1 to 1:30, can't we have then 1:30 to 2 o'clock restriction in this area to make it more enforceable, to make it a viable round for the enforcement officer?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, the road that is close, very close, is in a very short walking distance. So half an hour should be plenty of time for them to do both of these roads. I also like to point out that we did go back to the residents and suggest that they would come up with one parking restriction on one side of the road from 10:30 to 11, with another restriction on the other side of the road to 2:30, so they can move around. So that was another suggestion. So originally we did look at the 1 to 1:30, suggested we would move it, but that wasn't met with approval. So we've gone back to the 1 to 1:30. I say, and there is another road. It's very close to that road, but they can also stagger the days that we do these. We don't want to be too uniform in our enforcement. So it will be enforced, and it will be enforced quite well, I thought. and a petition, sorry, the petition was received from the residents themselves. One of the residents, I believe, went round and done the petition, went round to all the properties and signed it. And we received it in the offices. We had no involvement in the original petition, just the consultation.
So 2.8 actually on page 6 refers to a petition. So 30 residents out of 39 actually came to the council and said, can you please give us restrictions?
We had a petition received in an envelope with all their details of the who done what and who signed what. So it was a petition received from the residents themselves in a paper form.
Okay, and that was the 30 residents were on the petition.
Yeah, that was it, yeah.
That's pretty convincing, I think. Thank you.
Yes, I think so, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I was about to, I mean, none of us take the imposition of restrictions lightly, but I was about to second Councillor English's motion, but I see that Councillor Clark has beaten me to it in the IM. I'll move on to Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it just might be useful that I do know that the Councillor Michelle Hasty, who is actually one of the North members, is in favour of these restrictions. It's been going on some time now. The majority of residents have been surveyed 3 or 4 times. The majority of residents are in favour of it. So actually, I was also going to second Councillor English's proposal. I think it's quite straightforward that we should, whilst recognising the objections, move on and accept this proposal.
Councillor Clark, do you want to speak as seconder, or can I just move to a vote?
I think it's all been said, Chairman. I think it has been going on for a long time. It was comprehensively discussed at JTB. Let's move forward.
Thank you. I'll ask the clerk to go through the list of members and ask you to vote, which would be for, against, or abstain, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Councillor Burton.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor English.
For.
Councillor Garton.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
For.
Councillor Mackay.
For.
Councillor Mumford.
For.
Councillor Parfitt-Reed.
For.
And Councillor Spooner.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. That was unanimously for.
Thank you. Therefore, that is carried. Thank you, members. We can next move on to item 15. This is the petition referred to us by full council. You'll have seen the matter set out in the papers for you. Mr. Steve Healy has asked to address the committee on the item. And he's addressing us on behalf of Save Our Heathlands Action Group. Mr. Healy, are you with us, please?
I am, Chairman. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillors, before you tonight is the petition we presented to full council a few weeks ago, titled Enough is Enough, on behalf of the Save Our Heathlands Action Group. I won't repeat the case I presented to full council on the origins of the petition, nor the specific concerns that we raised. I will assume that you've refreshed your memory through the paper that's been presented tonight by officers. What I would like to say, though, is that we're remaining disappointed as a campaign group that the voice of over 4,500 people, residents, does not seem to have been heard by this committee. This debate tonight feels somewhat academic, given that the draft spatial strategy was pushed through last week as your preferred approach. We are disappointed with the lack of discussion and debate that was had to agree the draft strategy, and we ask tonight whether this committee genuinely took any of the valid concerns raised in this petition into account. Members of this committee reassured us at full council a few weeks ago that the decision would be made in the public arena fully, clearly and transparently. This did not happen last week, with what appeared like more of a whitewash attempt to avoid mentioning garden communities in any context. We do say again to you, this council doesn't appear to be listening to residents. This petition specifically asks for a rethink on garden communities as a policy option. Tonight, we ask you to seriously consider whether this type of spatial approach continues to be the right thing for Maidstone when there are so many constrained and contentious sites. As I said last time, Maidstone does not easily have available sites for such big projects, hence why the 4 shortlisted sites are so controversial. We ask you to seriously consider the infrastructure requirements to unlock any future garden community, and the infrastructure must come first, with the historic infrastructure deficiencies addressed as well. We don't see this forthcoming in the 4 shortlisted garden communities at present. We also seem to be witnessing the perverse situation of the least worst garden community with the vaguest chance of being delivered being spared in favour of 2 which have far slimmer chances of delivery. This is also against the professional advice that you paid for to assess your proposals. We ask, therefore, whether this committee is listening to the paid for objective findings of your experts as well. Maidstone's residents do not want new towns built in the middle of the countryside at the expense of hundreds of acres of green field, miles away from main conurbations and employment centres. The government and Prime Minister are not advocating this mass building in the countryside that are so reliant on the private car. So why is it central to your preferred spatial strategy that you're planning to consult on in a few weeks? And finally, I'd like to make a plea on engagement and transparency, the last point of this petition. Your commitment to listening during the next public consultation can only seriously be accepted if you provide enough time for residents to respond. Rushing through a public consultation lasting only 3 weeks at the beginning of December, when residents' minds are rightly engaged in preparing for the festive season, does not feel like this council is wanting to actively listen and make time for people to have their voices heard. Instead, it feels more like an underhand tactic to suppress engagement on this very important matter. The pressure is subsiding on the national planning front. It's clear that the government needs to review its approach and timeline, and I'd urge you tonight on behalf of many residents to do the same here in this borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Healy. I have 2 visiting members noted, and I would start with Councillor Mrs. J. Sams.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillors, I speak for both of us, myself and Councillor Tom Sams. Firstly, can we congratulate the petition's authors and promoters? The petition was born out of frustration. We saw the petition taken to every part of this borough. Indeed, it is said that the petition gave rise to the emboldening residents to ask questions of its elected representatives. If you read comments from residents on the web, it was about houses being built without supporting infrastructure, homes in areas choked with traffic fumes and without supporting infrastructure. Clearly the message was, as the posters said, enough is enough. The situation could have been very different tonight, but for the pandemic's influence. The drivers of this campaign have to be congratulated. We read the accompanying briefing note and may we pick out on a couple of points. Challenging house building numbers. This was done after the petition was begun and people were asking what this council was going to do. Rethink garden communities. Time will tell if council has chosen the right strategy on this and the inspector will judge. Complete a full infrastructure assessment. Given the previous disquiet from residents and the petition's success, residents still remain sceptical. Lastly, be transparent, engage with communities. The engagement of residents in the plan will judge this. The time frame is problematical, as has been said by the proposer. Claiming that the engagement is actually 6 weeks is disingenuous. The engagement with parish councils and local communities before any final decisions are made. Tonight we had engagement with parish councils, which will be said as engagement with parish councils, when clearly it was about process. It wasn't listening to views on site, it was about the process of the plan. So we feel that this engagement needs to be longer. Clearly it's not, but I'd like to thank the proposer for the petition, and I think we need to listen when we're talking about over 4,000 residents signing a petition. We need to make sure we're listening, members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Sams. If Councillor T. Sams doesn't wish to speak, I think we can move to members and open the debate. Councillor English, perhaps you're the first indication.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members. It's an emotive subject. It's always been an emotive subject, but we've got to, unfortunately, untangle some of these pieces. First of all, it's very easy to get pleased about backbench rebellions in the House of Commons and think the cavalry have turned up. Unfortunately, it might be rather like the 7th Cavalry at the Little Bighorn. We do not know at all whether or not the government are serious about changing the algorithms significantly. It would not be the first time that an announcement has been made of a significant change in government policy in regards to planning under this and previous governments, and the actual factual changes have been very, very small. There is a huge risk that if we suddenly decide to slow down this process, we will in fact end up with a very much larger amount of housing and a serious problem. I hope that's not what will happen, but that could happen if we slowed this process down. It is a conflict between trying to do this thing reasonably fast and avoid, if we can, an increase in housing, and actually have a consultation. I think we do have a valid consultation and we do need to listen. I personally, and I did make this point at the last meeting, I'm not convinced of the merits of the Lennon proposal. I do think there's a lot wrong with it and that we need to think very seriously about that. However, looking at the wider issues in the petition, yes, we actually have been challenging and campaigning against the house building targets. And no, that did not start after the petition started. It started under the various parties on this council about 5 years ago, when the local plan original local plan was being developed, and we had some very limited success. In terms of some of the other things there, we can't not accept new house building levels because we do not set the house building levels. We can make an argument about unsustainability and we can try and get as much infrastructure planning done as possible. But at the end of the day, the government has never accepted infrastructure limitations as a reason for not having housing allocations. They have always said, in every local authority in this country where those issues have been raised, you're going to have to do the housing targets and find the infrastructure later. I'd like to do it the way the petitioners want, but unfortunately, there is no process that allows that to take place in England. And because of that's the way the planning system is set up and has been. It's not just under this government, it's under previous governments. It's been set up that way for some time. It has got worse, but that has been the general trend. So what I do think we have to make the best of the consultation process we do have, and just because a proposal is Maidstone Borough Council's preferred option through P&R committee, that does not mean that we should accept the Lennon proposal. In my personal opinion, it lays us open to serious criticism at the local planning inquiry, and I just don't think it adds up. It's not a garden community project in any meaningful sense of the word, and I really do think we should reconsider it. But that's my personal view, and I don't think the committee as a whole shares that view.
Thank you, Councillor English. I'd like to speak myself next. I'd like to respond directly to Mr. Healy, and I'd like to say three things. We are listening. We are trying to balance the views of many, and we are trying to balance the evidence. And our objective in doing so is to find an appropriate option for Maidstone. And I would like to move that we thank the petitioners and formally accept the petition with the full weight of 4,000 signatures as a formal response to the consultation. And I invite a seconder for that. Councillor Garton, I have you on the list next.
Mr. Chairman, I happily second your proposal. Let me address the points Mr. Healy raised. Challenge and campaign against national government house building targets. Yes, we are challenging it. We are campaigning against it. The full council passed a motion not too long ago to campaign against it, to lobby central government. Unfortunately, to no avail. Nobody listens to mere district councillors, certainly not in the wings of Westminster. Point 2, rethink the building of garden communities. Well, I would love to rethink it, but the alternative is dispersal, and Maidstone has been suffering so much from dispersal. Communities have been uprooted. Community cohesion is suffering up and down the borough. Lenham is a prime example there, where we've got an old village of Lenham. We have a fairly modern part of Lenham to the west, and now we're building an even more modern part of Lenham to the east of the village centre in years to come under the new neighbourhood plan, and to the south of Lenham. We're expanding it so much that we are actually joining Lenham with Harwich, which are two distinct places. So dispersal has to stop. We've got to look for alternatives. Point 3 on this paper was not to accept that not accept new house building levels that are unsustainable for the borough of Maidstone. No, I don't accept new housing building levels which are unsustainable. I personally don't accept these, but these are figures which are forced upon us by central government. And although I'm an elected local representative, I sometimes feel I'm an elected local administrator, but this is the law of the land under which we are operating. So I'm sorry I may sound rather depressed here, but this is the fact of life. I wish I could do more to support Mr. Healy and all these 4,000 signatories to this. Complete a full infrastructure assessment, he asks us. We really don't have any time to do that. The central government is forcing our hands again to rush, and another review of your local plan, and another review of your local plan, and another review of the local plan. But we have no time for it. I wish we had time for it. But can I give you my personal opinion? We have certainly the infrastructure assessment, my personal infrastructure assessment is, it is rubbish. We need to find an alternative. And again, the only way to build infrastructure afresh would be to have a garden settlement or something alternative to dispersal. And the final point be transparent and engage parish councils and local communities. I'm the biggest supporter of transparency. I like to have the local parishes, the local communities involved in all decision making. But as much as our hands are tied, I unfortunately have to pass the message down again to the communities. Please tell us as much as you can, but don't expect wonders from us. Yes, we are pushing for a very abbreviated consultation. I would have liked not to take this consultation part at all, but we have to do, we decided to do it. Please put all objections to the local plan forward, and for that reason, Mr. Chairman, yes, I second you. Your proposal to make this an official Regulation 18B answer and include it as such with the weight of 4,000 signatures.
Sounds like you're still pushing your rusty wagon, Councillor Garton. Do I have any other speakers?
Yes.
Is that you, Councillor Mackay?
It is, Mr. Chairman, yes. I'll make it brief. As probably the only one here that actually has lived in a planned community, I lived in Crawley for 10 years. I understand some of the advantages and disadvantages of such communities. Now, Crawley never claimed to be a garden community, but infrastructure and housing went alongside one another. And in a lot of respects, it had a lot of advantages living there. I struggle sometimes with Heathlands when it is described as a garden community, because as I've said previously, I can't quite see that sandwiched between a motorway and a railway line. And I share some of Clive's reservations. I would like to see more details. So, all is not lost, Janet, Tom, Mr. Healy, but there are other alternatives to Heathlands which may be more unpalatable. I'll leave it at that.
Perhaps not entirely unique in your residency in a new settlement, as someone who was born on the edge of Harlow Newtown myself. No other speakers indicating. We have a motion before us to thank the petitioners and to accept it as a formal consultation with the full weight of the 4,000 signatures. Can I ask the clerk to take a vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So, Councillor Burton.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor English. You are muted, Councillor English.
Sorry, the mouse was playing up. For.
Thank you. Councillor Garton.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
For.
Councillor Mackay.
For.
Councillor Mumford.
For.
Councillor Parfitt-Reed.
For.
And Councillor Spooner.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. That is unanimously carried.
Therefore, that is noted as carried. Thank you. Concludes that item. As I indicated earlier, I would switch the order at this point to item 17. This was the motion received at full council concerning anti-idling and referred to this committee. Councillor Atkinson has asked to exercise his right to address the committee as the original mover of the motion. Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thanks for bringing it forward. I can now watch a pointless football match when this is over. Anyway, thanks for that. I'd like to think that the original motion to full council on September the 30th was self-explanatory and doesn't need much amplification, but I will amplify anyway. As it says in the briefing note in Appendix A to this item, Maidstone Borough Council adopted its low emissions strategy in December 2017. Our current strategy is simply education and, I quote, promotion to encourage better practice. However, the December 2017 document also stated, and I quote again, the Council will explore the adoption of enforcement powers should the educational approach need reinforcement. We believe that time, 3 years on, has come. The voluntary approach clearly hasn't worked. You only have to walk anywhere in Maidstone to see vehicles of all descriptions with engines idling, pumping out noxious fumes. Or come to Farley Lane in my own ward of Fant, when traffic is queuing, often up as far as Glebe Lane and beyond, whilst waiting at the closed level crossing. And of course, on the other side of Farley Bridge up Station Hill, most vehicles leave their engines idling despite the sign near the crossing itself urging drivers to switch them off. Paragraph 3.2 of the briefing note says that leaving your engine idling unnecessarily can be problematic to enforce. I think this is a spurious argument. It's a bit like the word reasonable used in so many legal situations. What is reasonable can usually be resolved satisfactorily And I also believe that the meaning of unnecessarily can be resolved in a similar manner by using common sense. In fact, Maidstone Borough Council itself, in a recent submission to government, has requested that we enforce against unnecessary pavement parking. So we've actually used the word unnecessary in our own official submission. I also refer committee to paragraph 3.4 of the briefing note, which explains very succinctly some of the dangers of idling engines. We should also bear in mind that the UK is now in breach of the EU Air Quality Directive. Under this directive, fines can reach €400 million, and under the reserve powers of Part 2 of the Localism Act 2011, these fines can be passed on to any public authority whose act or omissions contributed to these breaches. A policy paper produced by DEFRA, dated 14th January 2019, states quite explicitly that, and here I quote, "You should turn off the engine if your car isn't moving. Idling cars can have a significant localised effect on air quality, especially around schools, care homes and train crossings. Local authorities can issue fixed penalty notice to drivers who leave their engines running unnecessarily while their vehicles are stationary on the road." So we have official endorsement from the government for adoption of Regulation 12. For all the reasons I've just talked about, I believe that now is the time for Maidstone Borough Council to adopt the provisions of Regulation 12. Adoption will serve many purposes. It will help people with respiratory illnesses, including COVID-19. It will reduce pollution. It will reduce our contribution to global warming. And it sends out a continuing signal that Maidstone Borough Council is sincere about its green policies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson. We do have one of our officers, Mr. Littlemore, with us this evening, who usefully provided the briefing note to full council. If members wish to seek any clarification of that note or any further advice. Councillor Garton, are you indicating on this item, I think?
Please, Mr. Chairman. I'm in support of this because it is a nuisance of people idling their vehicles. As Councillor Atkinson said, it's bad for the environment, it's bad for the vehicle, it's bad for the people who stand right next to it. It is pretty well drafted, these proposals, and finding people should always be the last resort. So I think if we keep this as our main idea behind it, then yes, I would like to give our officers, be it the parking enforcement officers or any other council officer, the right to knock on a car's window and say, "Sorry, sir or madam, do you realise that this is not good for your vehicle? It's not good for your person. It's certainly not good for the environment." I have I read the exemptions and the explanations at 3.8, where vehicles have to idle by technical reasons or otherwise. As I said at full council when we discuss this, there is also the issue of taxi drivers trying to keep warm, and I've been harping on at licensing committee, and I don't want to take my licensing committee speech over to this committee, but I've been harping on for officers to look at options of encouraging taxi drivers to operate parking heaters which are independent from the engine and would cause less pollution than an engine idling for the drivers to keep warm. But I think we need, in the meantime, until the licensing committee can address that and the taxi trade may be able to implement that, we need to have another clause added to 3.8 where vehicle occupied acting by a person in trade or business has to heat the vehicle to comply with health and safety at work regulations. That in that case idling should be permitted as well, because the last thing I want to happen is our enforcement officers making taxi drivers in the middle of the night freezing cold or come heavy-handed on the taxi trade. I think it is pretty obvious that that shouldn't happen anyway, but I think we have to send a signal from this committee. Otherwise, I would like to. Has it been proposed? I would like to propose it. Otherwise, if that has already been proposed, I certainly would like to second it.
What
it hasn't been proposed.
Councillor English, I'm the chairman, not you. Councillor Garton, what precisely are you proposing? Councillor Garton, have we lost you?
I hope so.
I will come back to you, Councillor Garton, if you reappear. Councillor English, you were indicating.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I pressed the mute button.
So my question was, what precisely are you proposing, please,
that we
Councillor?
give our officers the tools to implement fixed penalty tickets, so to give them the legal backing, to make it a finable offence to leave your engine idling unnecessarily in the borough of Maidstone.
So what you would be saying then perhaps is that you would be instructing officers to progress the undertaking of powers of enforcement against anti-idling.
Yeah. Again, as I said, the points as raised under particularly 3.8 and the guidance also mentioned that. Well, the whole paragraph of 3 on page 74, 75, these are good guidelines which ought to be implemented, plus what I just said about keeping our taxi drivers moving.
Chairman, can I just clarify something?
Yes, please.
So you're actually considering a motion in front of you. So there is actually that's the purpose of what has been put here and referred from council. So the action within the motion is this council therefore resolves to ensure that the provisions of Regulation 12, it's that paragraph. So that's
right.
Is your starting point for anything that you want to do, whether you approve that motion, you reject that motion, or you amend that motion. But that's what is in front of you. So if Councillor Garton wishes to move something, that is what is on the papers.
Yeah, that's what I would like to move, that we accept this motion, and that in accepting the motion we delegate powers to officers to draw up the guidelines which comprise all these very valid points in paragraph 3 about the guidance that fining is a last resort, plus the 3.8, the exemptions to where people are permitted to idle. So that should be part of the guidance being given. But I'm happy for officers to delegate power to draft.
If I can,
English, can I come to you?
Yes, I was sorry. I was trying to come in earlier, Mr. Chairman, precisely for this reason, that we need to actually establish exactly what's being proposed. So I was going to sort of second a motion along these lines, but I think what we're actually saying is that this committee accepts the principle of the resolution proposed, and instructs officers to prepare a report setting out how this recommendation would in fact be implemented.
Do we need to go that far? Could we not just simply accept it, give the powers, and then just ask officers to draw up some guidance?
Well, I think that's what we're saying, but that guidance would need to be approved by a committee at some point. They can't just do it.
If the guidance more or less comprise the points as raised on the papers, I'd be happy to delegate that. And I'm probably one of the least likely people to delegate powers.
Okay, I think Councillor English is quite correct that a matter such as this, once the proposal is drawn up, would need to come back to this committee to be adopted, ratified, whatever the appropriate, or indeed if it even needs to go to full council, we'll have to check procedurally.
It's a policy, it therefore has to come back to a committee, but I think that we can that what Councillor Garton and I should be saying is that we accept the principle of the recommendation from the motion from full council. We would like to see these powers adopted and instruct officers to go away and prepare a full report on how it could be done and report back to this committee.
Okay, I was just wondering whether it's appropriate to perhaps ask Mr. Littlemore to comment that he's satisfied that what's being suggested here is an achievable task within resources available. Mr. Littlemore, is there anything you can guide us with in that respect?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As the note sets out, the exemptions are the statutory exemptions, so they wouldn't form part of a policy because they're written there in law anyway, so we'd have to abide by those. I think that the issue around, as mentioned, around taxi drivers actually highlights the problem that you have, because it would be argued that that was necessary to have your engine running to keep the taxi driver warm. Why wouldn't that apply to other people equally as it does to taxi drivers? And that's where you get into difficulty with this legislation, because the argument about when is it necessary to either heat the car because you might have children in the car, or whether you're running air conditioning because it's 80, 90 degrees outside, it is the one that we're going to come up against. I think in terms of enforcement, particularly at the current time and looking ahead over the next 6 months, I think the community protection team, the environmental health officers are going to be consumed with dealing with the COVID regulations and any new regulations that come out around that, and enforcing and assisting businesses and people to abide by those regulations. So the opportunities to actually go out and enforce against or saturate areas to enforce these powers would be difficult in the foreseeable future. So I think, I agree that we all appreciate there are issues around people with idling cars, and we'd all want to address that. And I think we've tried to do that, and members' working groups have looked at that previously and actually set aside the powers that are listed here. But in licensing committee tomorrow evening, there will be another debate around this issue. And we've heard about government wanting to bring forward the new sales of EV cars and to do away with diesels and petrols. So there are other routes to achieving this. In terms of the air quality issue, I think the report notes that idling vehicles are not the main contributory factor to the problems that we have in Maidstone around air quality. There are other issues that don't involve cars being left idling unnecessarily. There are issues around cars idling in traffic jams on certain points. So yes, I can understand why members would want to support this. I'm not entirely sure it's going to achieve everything that you would like it to. Thank you, Chairman.
If I could just, Mr. Chairman.
No, you can't, because I have people in the list ahead of you.
I haven't really finished.
I was going to speak next, but I'm going to waive that and allow Councillor Clark, who hasn't contributed yet.
Thank you, Chairman. My point was we talked previously about the Lower Stone Street and Upper Stone Street corridor, and I think this is a particularly bad issue at Lower Stone Street. Very, very often, if you walk along Lower Stone Street to get into Gabriel's Hill, you will be walking past cars running their engine, whether it's a hot summer's day, a cold winter's morning, or any other time of the year. I do think that's the sort of thing that we need to target. And I do understand the issue. If you've got a contractor waiting to take a delivery and he's half on the pavement and half off, where do you start with enforcement with something like that when the engine's running? But I think that as the officer mentioned, that gives you the idea of it's not just the idling engine, it's the fact that it's blocking a major throughway at a point where pollution is a real pollution hotspot. So just the accelerating around that vehicle, stopping because you can't get past, it all compounds along with that running engine. I was going to say it earlier when we were talking about the motion, do we have to go to P&R, just given how much in the papers it mentions about training and other costs? I just wondered if, we were talking about making the decision here, whether this should go to P&R once that full report is made that was mentioned earlier.
I do think you're rather in danger of confusing issues there of pavement parking and obstacle and congestion and the resultant.
I know. I was just throwing it all
air
in
quality
for an enforcement officer. Sorry, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor English, then Councillor Mackay.
The definition of reasonableness, of course, is not one that is impossible to define, but I take the point that there are issues with it. In planning, of course, it was defined by the Wednesbury case. In terms of the same principles generally apply in other areas, but I take the point that this is not necessarily a straightforward and simple issue. There are many points in favour of this, and I don't think it's as negative a picture as Mr. Littlemore says, but I do believe that we should make an informed decision about what could actually be done, and not get ahead of ourselves and assume that this will solve everything, or take the negative view that it's all too impossible to do. Some authorities have been successful with this, others have not. I would like a considered view on this report, and I believe that is possible to achieve. What I do not think what we can't do is rush off and just implement a set of regulations. That what we can't, and what I don't think we should do is just dismiss it out of hand because it's all too difficult. And we've done that in the past with some other areas of regulation, and then it's turned out actually we could do it after all. So I think what I maintain my position that what we need is a full report setting out how it could be done, and yes, the downside too.
I'm deeply concerned about the resources that we have at hand with officer time and everything else that is required. Councillor Mackay, you are next. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. I may share your concerns, Mr. Chairman. I may agree with John Littlemore that in the short term, we will not have officers in a position to implement. But we should look beyond the foreseeable future. Let's look at COVID-19 won't be here forever. And this is a simple motion, one that full council readily agreed to. It doesn't need the confusion that Councillor Clark threw in. We're sending out a message to people when we put these things in place. And talks of taxis having to run their air conditioning, having to run their heaters because of the cold weather. Let's be realistic. We live in a quite benign climate in this country. The times when we absolutely must have our air conditioning unit and our heaters running are few and far between. So let's be reasonable. My understanding regarding taxis has got nothing. The major reason I was given for a taxi driver was that the starter motor was so poorly designed, they didn't want to switch it on and off too much. No, genuinely, because I asked the question, because and that was on a mild day during the day, and they weren't all idling. It tended to be the older taxis. But just think about the message you want to send to people. If you don't adopt this, if you don't send it for consideration, just think about the message you're sending. This is the council that adopted a climate change emergency. You know, let's be ahead of the curve. We're already well behind it on this particular, but let's send out a strong message, please.
So I think we all share the sentiment of the intention, we really do. But what I struggle with here is we're trying to move backwards, and all we're trying to move forwards, and all we're doing is looking backwards at the yesterday's problems. The solution is electric vehicles. The solution is more modern cars that automatically turn off. The issue of the contribution of this particular factor to Lower Stone Street, Upper Stone Street, it's not going to be remedied by this measure at all. The measure is prevent the vehicles stopping in the first place, therefore they won't be there idling. I just think that we've almost taken ourselves down an avenue, but of course we are all genuinely committed to improving the environment, to mitigating climate change events, and that we've set this up in front of the public as something that we have to follow through, otherwise we'll be seen not to be actually pursuing those things that I've just talked about, when actually we should be moving faster to the future. We should be educating, and we should be looking towards technology to solve this, which I do honestly believe will reach a solution before we can retrofit antiquated penalties, which will be contentious, difficult to arbitrate fair enforcement. Who is going to serve a notice on a car with a mother and two children on a cold, snowy day with the engine running? Who is going to do that? And how will you tell the difference between that one and the one parked next to them that's wearing a nice thick coat and can't really justify it? I just think this backwards looking, but the sentiment of it, 100% on board with it. Councillor Mumford, I think.
Very quickly, I won't be on here too long. 80s and 90s, I did extensive travel in Germany where it was second nature, and everybody, when they got to level crossing or whatever, switched their engine off. It was part of being a good driver and considering the environment. We'll kick this around and keep kicking this round. We have got a proposal on the table. I would like to propose that we now go to the vote and stop kicking it around anymore.
Councillor Mackay, you had indicated before that.
100% agree. Not surprising with Councillor Steve Mumford. I would add that no one is suggesting that this is the panacea for climate change and air quality problems. But in sport, it's called fractional advantage. So every little helps. Thank you.
I'll ask the clerk to take the vote, please.
Chairman, can I just ask that it be clarified again what is actually being moved and seconded, please?
Can I come back to you, Councillor Garton?
I think Councillor English made the right recommendations here. So if I second what Councillor English would like to propose.
Councillor English, are you able to clarify for the clerk?
Yes, that the committee accept in principle the recommendation to move forward with an anti-idling policy and ask officers to come forward with a full report setting out how such a policy could work in practice, with points both with a balanced assessment of how it could work or not.
Okay, I think I can support that. The vote then, please.
Chair, just before you do that, I know standing orders say that as mover of the motion to council, I can actually come back. So I just, I've got loads of comments.
I don't think you can, the clerk will confirm, but I don't think you can in this context. You're allowed to address the committee as the mover.
Yes, it's not a call-in.
We're not re-debating the motion as the motion isn't freshly put to us.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, you are correct in that.
The vote, please.
Thank you. Would you like me to reiterate the proposal just so that all members are aware, Chairman?
If you would feel comfortable doing that, yes, please.
Partially just to ensure that I have it recorded properly also, thank you. So I've got that the committee accept in principle the recommendation to move forward with an anti-idling policy and ask officers to come forward with a full report on how such a policy could move forward in practice with a balanced assessment on how this would operate.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Burton.
4.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor English.
4.
Councillor Garson.
4.
Councillor Mrs Grigg.
4.
Councillor Mackay.
4.
Councillor Mumford.
4.
Councillor Parfitt-Reed.
4.
And Councillor Spooner.
4.
That was unanimously 4, Chairman.
Thank you. That's carried. Thank you, members. I'm back to agenda item 16, a standing item on our agenda of an update on local plan review progress. Mr. Edgerton.
Thank you, Chairman. At last week's meeting of the committee, members agreed to undertake a public consultation on the Local Plan Review Regulation 18 Preferred Approaches document. I'm pleased to let members know that we are on course to publish the document, along with parallel sustainability appraisal consultation, on the 1st of December as intended. The document has undergone design, layout and graphics processes, and we have already commenced a pre-consultation engagement exercise, which will involve parishes, developers, infrastructure providers and key stakeholders and adjoining authorities. Other consultation arrangements, such as public notices and notifications, are in hand. This report is for noting.
Thank you very much for that. I have a note of visiting speakers, one or both of the Councillor Sams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had technical problems last time, which made it very difficult to speak, but hopefully it'll be a bit clearer this time. Councillors, regarding the consultation period, we raised the matter in the way we did by email, as we felt ultimately it was up to members to have a view. We received comments from members expressing both views. The option to remain with the timescale previously agreed or to take into account the messages that seem to be being put forward from reliable sources that we have additional time to think and reflect. It is the common view that the government is expecting the formula change to be of the algorithm might be announced within weeks. It is about understanding that the exceptional circumstances this country finds itself allows for a reasonable response to a changing situation. This council's elected councillors and its members of parliament have applied pressure because of the residents' disquiet and dissatisfaction with the planning numbers in the South East. Over the last few days, the Sunday Telegraph quoted the Minister of Housing, Communities and Local Government source saying the Prime Minister and the Housing Secretary have been listening to Conservative colleagues. We are working on a fairer formula which still meets our housing targets, but it's rebalanced so that more homes are built in urban areas, particularly in the Midlands and the North. The paper said the formula change is expected to be announced within weeks. The article added that other government sources said the shift was designed to help the government rethink the impact of the pandemic. The follow-up article in The Guardian said the government climbed down indicators shifting house building targets away from the southern shires and towards the towns and cities. Councillors, we have an opportunity to take a breath. We believe that the original urgency to complete the plan appears to have receded. Many councillors and officers were uncomfortable about the original timescale that was set. We reiterate that we can use this situation to now potentially extend the consultation period and would give officers time to undertake their role without rushing, allowing the public and other agencies the time to fully respond in the manner they wish to. We have suggested a time frame, but 6 weeks from December 30 is possible. The past month had been difficult. We have an opportunity to give all borough residents a greater opportunity to express their views with time to look at all information they require. Additionally, given the borough the knowledge that all our residents have been allowed to take part in the democratic process and have been fully consulted on the local plan for the Mason Borough. The present time frame with establishments closed that would in normal times be used to display hard copies prevents those who have no access to the internet viewing hard copies of the plan. Those residents will then be given the opportunity to engage with the process, thus enhancing democracy. This will be seen more favourably, and the perception will be that the borough is doing its best in very difficult times to allow inclusivity of the process. Finally, The collective pressure from many, including NBC, upon the government to review the housing strategy can therefore potentially be now used in our favour. We ask you to give consideration to this suggestion. Thank you, members.
Was that on behalf of you both, or does Councillor Mrs Sams also wish to?
On my behalf, thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to just make a few more sort of comments on it, Mr Chairman. Obviously, you replied to the email saying that we're obviously simply accelerating the standard plan process making. Well, from where we sit, we appear to be doing this at the expense of allowing residents to be fully engaged, and that doesn't sit comfortably with us. The plan making process surely is about a democratic process, and particularly in the middle of the pandemic. Obviously, you said that it was a major worry that you were progressing too slowly to meet the deadline. And again, this is a view, but surely subjective. Surely the desired intent of the plan should be its soundness, and this can be tested by full participation of residents. An additional 3 weeks, members, would marry up with all the other consultations that I've viewed in relation to the local plan on the consultation portal, which is nearly all 6 weeks. All those to do with the local plan, various neighbourhood plans, other plans as well. We're reviewing our local plan and residents will view it favourably, and the democracy in the middle of a pandemic will see NBCs doing its best. If we look at other consultations, we allow 8 weeks for a planning application to be determined. On the public spaces protection order, 8 weeks. Street trading, 8 weeks. The licensing policy, 6 weeks. I think we had a dog walking policy recently as well. And we feel that we're short-circuiting democracy at a time when we need full engagement. If we made it 6 weeks, this would give an additional 12 working days, and it would give residents, officers and ourselves time to take that breath, and members, we think this should be done. Finally, at the meeting prior to this, we heard that the council has scope to make changes during the process, e.g. time. Yet an additional 12 days for consultation appears to be suggested, not an area where we have it seems to be not an area where we have scope to make allowances for residents. I just asked, please review the timescale. 6 weeks is an option. We could finish on January the 12th. Thank you.
Thank you. For the fuller understanding of members, Councillor Mrs Sams referred to a private correspondence between myself and her earlier in the day, where I expressed a view that I'd always been concerned that without the threat of new numbers and the existing timetable before we revised matters, I'd always had an unnerving concern that we may not have had our work completed in time before the current plan expires. I do share the concerns about the truncated public consultation, but we aired that matter on at least 3 occasions, and by majority of council we are embarked upon the timescale before us. I think Councillor English, were you the indication for this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. If we could trust in government press releases, I think we could indeed adjust the timetable. But those of us who remember Peter Tichenor's speech earlier this evening about Gypsy and Travellers will know that there have been many government press releases and announcements about the supposed significant changes to government policy on Gypsy and Travellers. And yet, when push comes to shove, those changes amount to very little. So we should be very careful about basing any decision of this council on a ministry press release. I would be absolutely certain that we should never do so. We need to have as much certainty in this process as is possible. Now, if I'm wrong and the government do come forward with massive changes, perhaps we can adjust things later on. But actually, should we? I mean, those of us who remember the more consultation is good, but it mustn't be endless consultation. I do get the impression sometimes that there's a temptation for those who don't like a particular proposal to stall for time. You will remember when Councillor Garland was leader of the council, this tended to be the tactic adopted to delay decisions and then delay them again and then delay them further. We do need to move forward with this process, although it will upset certain people. Yes, we should adjust if the government allows things to change later in the timetable, but we can't do it now. And even if we can, we should be wary of assuming that means we can wait. We can take months and months and months for endless debate about this, because that will only mean that we get more housing, whether or not the government adjusts the algorithm, because any delays in reviewing this plan will lead to us risking the 5-year housing land supply, even if the algorithm is not adjusted upwards. So we must. So I think at this stage we really must continue this process, because I don't personally believe in Santa Claus.
And I think we should probably remind ourselves of the significance of 12 days, half a working month. And the timetable that officers said was possible to achieve a further consultation in June means that we need to subtract the election period, subtract PERDA, and we need to be hot on the matter of consultation responses in early February. And to make that late February instead blows the timetable. So I think we're embarked upon a process that we must stick to for all the reasons that Councillor English has said, and many more. Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, really, Clive said pretty much everything I want to say. I think, yes, my heart did sort of soar slightly when I read the press release and I was reading that there might be some movement, but I just think we are committed. We've debated this endlessly, and it was a very difficult decision, and I think we came to the conclusion we did because we wanted to protect the borough as much as possible, and it is my belief that we need to continue down the path that we're on, and we'd need to see a lot more from central government to actually change course at this point. Thank you.
I don't see any further indications. This report is just for noting. Unless I hear dissent, I shall consider it to be noted. That is therefore noted, and I'd like to thank you all, members, officers and other contributors this evening for your time and energies this evening, and I am delighted to now declare this meeting closed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, David, and the well chaired, and thank you to the officers.
Thank you.
Yes,
Good night,
indeed.
everyone. Thank you.
Have a good evening and catch up with that football, Keith.